Start at your speakers. It's without a doubt going to have the biggest impact on your sound. And if you're looking for freebies, really dive into speaker placement. Hey guys, I have a couple DAC reviews to do and I plan to handle them a little bit differently than in the past. Usually when I do one of these, I cover the features, the connectivity, the build quality, things along those lines, and then I generally wrap it up with a pretty simple sound review. The sound review, like I said, was pretty simple, as long as the product performed correctly. I talk about things like it being transparent to the source without audible faults, things along those lines, but I always get comments in the comment section down below wishing for further elaboration on the sound. Well guys, first of all, I do think DACs sound different, but it's not that simple, and I'll get a little bit more into that as we go here. I will say that I'm yet to hear the mythical DAC that provides the night and day difference in my listening experience. My ears must just not be golden and dragging on the ground just yet. And I guess if SMSL has one that they think might convince me otherwise, send it on over. I'm always willing, to keep an open mind on this kind of thing. The crazy part is how fast this area grew in the last couple years. I think we've reached the point of saturation where a lot of the DACs can and do sound very close to the same, which is fantastic. It's really great for the consumers. But on the other hand, it still comes back to my stance that some DACs sound different. If you look beyond sine waves, it's not actually that difficult to reason it. Different circuit designs, output stages, individual components, you could really go on, but also keep in mind that I didn't say better. And I just said different. That's very important here because my preference of sound may differ from yours. A difference in sound just doesn't plainly equate to a better or worse sound in my opinion. I know a lot of people out there who are not looking for that flat neutral sound. They like a healthy curve. And if they get a real or perceived difference, who am I to fault them for listening to what they like? My bulletin board checklist here though would be please have the rest of your system in check before you go too deep on the DAC wagon. Start at your speakers. It's without a doubt going to have the biggest impact on your sound. And if you're looking for freebies, really dive into speaker placement. It can do some almost magical things if you really have that dialed in. Now that we have that out of the way, today we're going to review the SMSL DO100 Pro. It's a budget-friendly pick that lights up the stat sheet as well as offers great connectivity and a unit priced under $250. It actually comes in roughly $220, so while not SU1 pricing, this one does offer, more in several other areas. For one, we get dual ESS 9039 DAC chips here, a fully balanced design, 6 op amps over what I believe was 4 on the previous model, and a really attractive case for this price point. This one actually feels pretty substantial in your hands. It's far from a paperweight that's going to be sliding all over your desktop if you have anything plugged into it. I won't make you wait till the end today to hear my final thoughts on the sound performance either. I'm a big fan of testing products priced within the same price bracket that is. In this case, let's start with the ultra budget end, the Wii Mini. It has a well-known DAC weakness. It's really not a surprise to anyone. It's a great product, but the internal DAC leaves something to be desired. The sound is just a bit thin compared to some of its big brothers. The DO100 Pro hands down increases the performance to my ear, and I feel like most would agree in this case. The noise floor felt lower and the dynamic range just in a lot of ways felt larger. I would guess the largest contributing factor being the noise floor in this case. Skipping up to the Wii Pro Plus, it's an AKM 4493 DAC. It measures well and it really is a good DAC in general, but the DO100 Pro still bested it to my ear. My test tracks had a bit more weight and just the sonic characteristics that favor my listening tastes. So 2 for 2 so far, but I'm sort of lining up some easy pickings on budget products and their integrated DACs. If we take this a step further to the new Wii Ultra, I was no longer able to comfortably say that I had a preference one way or the other here. I would still maybe lean to the external SMSL, but it's getting too close for comfort for myself. And that just shows you it's not all in the DAC chip. A lot of it has to do with outside influences, such as how it's implemented in the unit itself. It doesn't have to live in the budget realm either. I did pair this with the mildly priced Audiolab 6000A, and I had a preference to SMSL as well, so in my eyes, I guess I would label this as a solid performer up to the mid-price gear. I did test beyond this on the Volumio Motivo coming in around $1,800 as well. My preference to sound was to the Motivo, but the price difference is pretty much Grand Canyon wide and not really a fair comparison. The DO100 Pro proved to be a worthy upgrade over many of the internal offerings during my test. But even with these findings, I would still search for the sort of no-brainer fixes to the sound before this, namely speakers and speaker placement in the room. I just want to keep reiterating that. Also, I totally get the argument that people use that something measures as transparent, and that is the ideal sound. But what if it isn't to you? A lot of people favor the increased distortion of an R2R DAC, or a tube amp, or even a turntable. We can chase numbers all we want, and I welcome it, as it does help to explain the sound that we're hearing, but it doesn't determine what the end user likes best at the end of the day. It's individual and subjective in almost every sense. We can play the statistics and say people prefer a particular curve, such as the Harman curve, but obviously that isn't flat either. So do as you please with the sound in your space. The hi-fi police won't come knocking unless you're blasting, something like Limp Bizkit at 100 decibels at 3 a.m. Then someone is gonna come knocking. Just for disclosure purposes, YouTube may compensate me for the usage of tags in this video, just something new that I'm playing around with as far as product links. If you guys could, please like, comment, subscribe down below, really makes a difference. Let's take a look at the case a little closer here before going over the rear on this one. It's still a smaller footprint, but bigger than many of the others at the price points below this. I do prefer this size of unit for a number of reasons. For one, they tend to be heavier and less likely to be thrown around by the cables that are plugged into it. Sometimes the cable weight alone can pull products around or lift it up, and that can be really annoying on your desktop. This one doesn't really suffer from that because it has a decent amount of weight to it. Bigger cases also allow for more sort of everything, more DAC chips, more op amps. It's as simple as the design doesn't need to be limited by the compact nature of the case. And most importantly for a lot of people, this case allows a good number of connection options, which this unit does a great job with. We get XLR and RCA outputs, coax, optical, USB-C, and HDMI ARC for inputs. I guess don't forget Bluetooth 5.1 as well, LDAC, aptX HD, SBC, and AAC. The USB also has the ability to switch between 1.1 and 2.0 for compatibility with various gaming consoles. That's within the menu system, and we'll get to that one in just a little bit. I mentioned HDMI, and that one tends to pique a lot of people's attention, so we might as well test that one out right now. And this one can be tricky as far as compatibility between brands. You can run into issues with the power on and off sync, volume controls with your TV remote, and that kind of thing. Testing today is connected to an LG C3 OLED, just for your reference. And I don't really have great news in this particular pairing. It doesn't seem that the LG is able to sync up with the HDMI functions with this DAC. I can get the TV to detect the DAC is there. It displays ABC soundbar, but as far as syncing the power on and off or being able to use the TV remote for volume control, I was unable to get anything to work. I did attempt powering on and off units, changing some settings, as HDMI devices can be a bit picky to get that initial sync, but no dice. So for my particular combo, it doesn't appear to be an option. If I were to use this DAC with this TV, I would need to use the TV remote as well as the DAC remote or controlling it on the device itself for power and volume duties. This sort of removes this as a viable option for myself for TV usage. I primarily would be using this at my desktop anyways, and in that place it does work fantastic there, but I just like to cover all the usability options as well for anyone looking to use this in various other spaces. As I mentioned, we can control all the functions of this unit with the included remote. I'm always in favor of an included remote, even if it's just being used on my desktop, as I'm more likely to control everything through the remote in my hand, rather than, reaching over and having to adjust the dial. I don't know, it's just my personal preference. SMSL almost always includes remotes with their products, which is great considering it's a bit mind-blowing that the number of products out there that don't include them costing multitudes more. And in this case, we get a simple but effective remote. It does power, menu controls, inputs, volume. There's a function button. The function button having a very important feature beyond switching to Bluetooth. It can turn off the display with a longer hold. Kind of taking some final looks at this one. I think it's a pretty nice looking DAC. I like the floating display that they have going on here and they've been using lately. The knob is plastic, but it feels fine. You do get a little bit of tactile sensation from it. It's a multifunction button, being it's really the only thing on the front beyond the display. If you're not a remote user, the dial is where you're going to be cycling through the menus and all of your various controls. Going over the menu really quickly on this one, we have the inputs, USB, Bluetooth, optical, coax, HDMI, and then we go into DPLL, which is basically fine-tuning the jitter. The lower the number, the better the jitter performance. I was able to leave mine at 1. You likely will too, but if you're having an issue with something like a TV, it may require a bit of fine-tuning. Just don't overthink this one though. Then to quickly cover USB 2.0, if you're connecting to a Windows device, you will need to install the driver. If you're selecting 1.1, it's likely for something like a gaming console. Just note you will have to power cycle the unit to change from 1.1 to 2.0, just something to keep in mind. Then we get into filters, which if you can hear much of a difference, then by all means go for it. It's quite difficult to hear a difference, but my suggestion here is to play something you're very familiar with and cycle through the filters. If anything sticks out to you, go with it. Mine is using the default 1. Your results may vary. And finally, brightness. Adjust it from 1, a dimly lit screen, all the way up to cornea burning 8 if you really want to see it clearly. Now for thorough instructions on how to utilize and play MQA. Just kidding. Take care. Later.